Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're going to get started with today's webinar with Beverly Kaye. And Bev, I'm so happy to be here with you today.
Oh, you say that to all the girls, don't you?
So today we are celebrating and learning from the 6th edition of this classic book on employee retention, Love 'em or Lose 'em, Getting Good People to Stay. This book was originally published in 1999 and it has sold over 800,000 copies around the world. And so we are so thrilled to be able to have the author, one of the authors of this book with us on today's webinar. And as you're coming in today, I hope you'll take a moment to say hello in the chat. We would love to use the chat throughout today's event to get your feedback on various topics. And we would love for you to communicate with each other. So please use the drop-down menu that says all panelists and attendees. And that way you can ensure that all the other participants in today's event will be able to see your comments. So take a look and find that drop-down menu. We would love to hear from you in the chat. I'll be monitoring it as much as I can while having a conversation with Bev on these topics today. And we are so glad that you've invested an hour of your time with us today. Now, if you happen to be calling in from an organization and you are using this event as part of your professional development, we would love to have you shout out your organization in the chat as well so that people know what organizations you represent. And so we'll take a look. I'm noticing that we have attendees from all across the country. Iowa, Bev says that you look lovely. We have Idaho and Virginia. We have Delaware. Rob says he loves the book. It looks like we have some folks in California. We have some folks representing Crew. We have a caller from Denmark, Copenhagen. We have Kelly representing John Deere Financial. Seeing lots of different states. So it's amazing that so many are coming into today's event with us. There's so many, I just can't even read them all. I think I see Mumbai. Kelly, if you're able to capture any interesting organizations or any interesting locations that are kind of off the beaten path, you can help me because this is like so fast because, you know, we have nearly 200 people already with us today, Bev. So as we get started today, a few housekeeping notes. We will be sharing a PDF of today's slides in case you'd like the chance to learn from and with them. We also will have a recording of today's event. So if you have other colleagues or friends who would like the chance to learn from Bev, you can go ahead and share our recording with others. Wow, I have Nairobi and New Zealand. What time is it in New Zealand? I can't even imagine what time it is in New Zealand. So what an amazing 6 a.m. in New Zealand. Wow, Caroline, thank you for getting up early to learn with us. So before we get any further, I want to make sure that you get to know a little bit about Bev Kaye, but just for fun, I do have a poll, and this poll, the responses to the poll will tell me into what detail I should go when I share Bev's bio in a moment. So here we go. How well acquainted are you with Bev Kaye's work? So we had a little fun with this because if you don't know Bev, you wouldn't know that she's just a load of fun. So do you mean Mary Kay, the makeup? Or maybe you've read all of Bev's books. Maybe you've heard her speak. Maybe you've read one or more of her books. This could be your first exposure to her work. Or if you're on the call, you might consider Bev your best friend. I know Kelly, who's our chat host today, who's going to keep us in the know with everything. Kelly happens to be Bev's best friend. So we'll give you a few more moments to comment on this poll and I'll tell you the results. And it sounds like, Bev, I need to read your entire bio because we've got 72% of the people on today's call. This is their first exposure to your work. Like, how is that even possible? How many best-selling books do you have, Bev?
I love it.
But yet, 71% of the people on the call, it's their first exposure to your work. So let me tell you all about my friend, Bev Kaye. Dr. Beverly Kaye is recognized internationally as one of the most knowledgeable and practical professionals in the areas of career development, employee engagement, and retention. So her contribution to the field of engagement and retention include the Wall Street Journal bestseller, Love 'em or Lose 'em, Getting Good People to Stay, the one that we talked about. This is the one we're celebrating today. It's now in its 6th edition. And some of her other books include Up is Not the Only Way and Help Them Grow or Watch Them Go. In 2018, the Association of Talent Development honored Bev with their Lifetime Achievement Award, recognizing her advanced knowledge, extensive practice across the talent development field, her thought leadership, and her contributions to the profession. And the Association of Learning Professionals, ISA, also honored Bev with their 2018 Thought Leadership Award for her body of work in support of work-related learning and performance. So Bev is a true legend. And so I'm excited for the learning that we get to have together today. Again, if you missed my opening comments, we will have a recording of today's event. And so we invite you throughout the event to share questions. And a bonus today is that when we get to the Q&A portion of the event, if you would like to speak to Bev face-to-face, we will bring you over as a panelist so that you can turn on your microphone, and you can also speak to Bev face-to-face by camera if you would like. Okay, so one more poll before we dive in. We would love to know about how you feel about the word love, because it's right in the title of Bev's book. So how comfortable are you using the word love at work? Are you not at all comfortable? Will you use it under the right circumstances? Does it depend on your employee or your relationship with that employee? Have you been known to say it on occasion? Are you a frequent user of the term, or are you only comfortable if someone directs the word love at you?
I love it. I love it all. Well, number one, I am a very frequent user of the word love. I'm in love with love. And, when Sharon and I first wrote the very first edition, 1999, our publisher very rightly said, can't you find another word? Because will people walk into a store, will manly men, I'm making that, walk into a store and take out a book on love, especially a business book. And Sharon and I worked hard to find another word. And no other word said as much as the word love does. It says, notice them, appreciate them, say hello to them, understand them. All of that, I think, is encompassed in the word love. And if you don't use it or are uncomfortable with it, substitute any other word. But I think it is about caring, about respecting, about all the words we know are part of belonging.
Well, Bev, I put the results to the poll up, and it looks like 34% of the people on today's call are comfortable using the word love at work under the right circumstances. And only 8% are not at all comfortable using the word love.
Understandable. Absolutely.
So, Bev, what would you say to the 8% of the folks on the call who might be managers who are uncomfortable with using the word love?
I'd substitute any other word that you are comfortable with that fits the person you're talking to. It could be, what do you appreciate about the person? What did they do yesterday that made you smile? Anything, but it is a form of, I see you, I recognize you, I notice you. So any other word will work. I think what people want. And, I want to say it's not rocket science, and I'm married to a rocket scientist. And it isn't rocket science. It's people want to know you see them in every way.
And there's a lot of chatter in the chat. So people are saying use the word appreciate, respect, care for. Adonia said saying love is funny for me because I'm in HR for a construction company with 93% men.
Be careful, be careful. Right.
Yeah. So Bev, I wonder if you could model for us some ways that you might use the actual love word in your conversation. Will you give us some examples of how? I know, Bev, I've seen you interact with your team members. Sarah's on the webinar today helping out, Lindsay and others who work in your organization. How do you use the word love?
I think, it takes, I notice, like I noticed that Sarah ran in here just this morning to help me get on this particular webinar. And, you know, when I'm done, I'm going to say, thank you, you saved my life. You know, I might not use the word, I love you, you saved my life, but thank you. And I think the more that we take note of what people do, and I'll give the audience a quick reminder around noting what people do. And I'd say recognize, meaning note it. Gee, you know, Becca, you are really good in this intro. I love your energy. Recognize and then verbalize, because sometimes we recognize and we don't say a word. So, Becky, I love I don't know how you do this every single day, but I know you do, and I know you bring your energy. So it's recognize, verbalize, and mobilize. So, Becky, did you ever think about being a talk show host? Because I have a connection for you.
Oh,
So,
that would be amazing.
so make it real. Make it real.
Well, Bev, I love that. I love the insights that you're bringing to our conversation today. And so your title is Love 'em or Lose 'em. And I'd love to talk for a few minutes about losing people. So, what are some reasons why people leave organizations? And is it really possible to prevent that? How do we keep from losing the people who are important to us in our companies? All of them.
And sometimes we love them and we still lose them. And I think it's how we lose them. In the Up is Not book, I talk about elegant exits and respectful returns. Like in the old days when someone left, the door was shut. You do not come back. I think when a manager is losing a great employee, it's up to that manager to say, I'm sorry to lose you. I'd love to hear how you're doing. Let me know. And, you know, I remember working with a company in the Silicon Valley who, when they lost great employees, when they lost employees, period, they sent a postcard. And it was a picture of their campus. And the postcard was sent at 3 months, 6 months, and 9 months. And the back of the postcard said, "Is the grass really greener?" And I thought that was a lovely idea. And they got a lot of return calls. No, it's not. You know, it's AstroTurf after all. But I think we lose people in numbers of ways. And the important thing now is don't lose them to the competition. Let them move around in your organization. Talent mobility, internal talent mobility is what I've always talked about. And the enterprise needs your talent. So help them move elsewhere before you have to say goodbye.
So, what would be some reasons, even if you give someone those opportunities, Bev, that they might still choose to leave? I know you've done a lot of research about why people leave.
Yeah, we did. And I'm sorry to say it, the big reason is my manager. My manager didn't do X. And you know, the big McKinsey study said people don't leave organizations, they do leave managers. The interesting question we asked in our research is, why do you stay? Not why do you go? And from asking, why do you stay, we began to learn what the opposite of that is. And I think it's, I don't think my skills were used. I didn't feel part of the team. I didn't feel like I belonged, you know, in that culture, in that organization. And the saddest one is no one will even notice that I'm gone. Oh, that's sad. It is. And here's the other thing we learned, because we found people who moved to the next organization, and we learned why they left. And many said it was their manager, and they actually used the word jerk. My manager was a jerk, and I couldn't stand it anymore. And as good researchers, we said, well, what do you mean by the word jerk? And they gave us 55 jerkatudinal characteristics, which we use, in our training. And many who left said, I left for a chance to do X. We went back to the manager and we said, did you know you lost Jane because she wanted to do X? That manager almost always said, well, why didn't she ask me? I could have made that happen. And that's another sad point. I could have made that happen. And it's why Sharon and I pushed in the book the idea of a stay interview instead of an exit interview. Ask people, what keeps them early on, at onboarding, and don't forget it.
That's really helpful, Bev. And I'm seeing some comments in the chat about this idea of jerks. Rob said he really liked the chapter on not being a jerk, that it's eye-opening that leaders don't always recognize, which behaviors may contribute to them being seen that way. And someone in the chat to panelists only is saying, I left my job because my boss was a jerk. So this is a real felt pain that people have. So Bev, we talked about love and lose, the title, Love Them or Lose Them, how to get good people to stay. Let's talk for a moment about what you mean by good people.
That's been a bandwagon I've been on for a long time. And that is when I'm invited into an organization to give a keynote, when my trainers and associates are invited in, it's often, you're going to work with our high potentials. You're going to work with our top tier around career development, around engagement, around retention. And I always say, but you've got buried treasure in your massive middle. And I think good is anybody for whom, if they left, you would feel terrible. It would hurt your production. It would. So good people may be people, entry-level people who haven't even shown what they can do yet. I think we have to expand the word good to mean anybody that I don't want to lose, to my team and to the enterprise.
Well, and Bev, you've talked about how expensive it is for companies when anyone leaves. Do you want to share a bit about that?
Well, the data says it's 200 times their salary and 300 times their salary. But I think the danger is on people left behind after the person left, on colleagues who missed them. I remember vividly one manager losing a good, solid performer and mouthing the words, no big deal, there's plenty of talent out there. And that word got out. And 6 more of that manager's direct reports left because they heard it as, not appreciating him, and thinking they can be easily replaced. So it hurts the culture. It hurts the atmosphere. It hurts all of that, more than just the pocket.
So let's talk about the word stay, Bev. So you mentioned the concept of stay interviews and talking to people about why they stay. What are some other ways that managers can influence people to stay?
I think asking the question, what keeps you? What makes work for you here? I think asking the simple question, what part of last week was best for you? I think asking the question, what part of last week, was toughest? I walked out the other day and I asked my two people in my office what makes them groan when I ask them to do something. So that I know what it is that they go, ugh, she's asking for that again. And it's those questions because they come from interest. They come from, I want to know you. And I think that's a large part, when we talk about inclusion and belonging, it's know me. And if you don't never ask me anything about the me who's here doing the work, then you won't know me.
Hmm. So asking almost anything, Bev, it sounds like taking an interest in noticing people is one of the ways that managers can
Right.
influence people to
And
stay.
saying something, and talking my own office, Sarah showed me a beautiful scrapbook she made for her partner, and I hope her partner's not listening because she didn't give it to you yet. But and I realized Sarah had great graphic skills that I didn't know. Now I could have shut my mouth and just said, that's a really nice scrapbook. But I recognized it. I said, gosh, did you put that together on your own? Wow. And then verbalized, do you like doing that? Is that something you want to do more of? And then mobilize, boy, do I have a project for you. It's that kind of attention.
So, Bev, earlier when we were talking about mobilize as it relates to the word love, someone put in the chat that they would love for you to explain a bit more about what you mean by mobilize. So this seems like a good time.
Well, it's like, how can I put what I know now into practice? Mobilize means don't just note it. And maybe if you have no idea how to put that into practice, ask. I saw how your eyes lit up when you presented to whoever. You were on it, you were in it. What about that excited you? And then you learn more about the other person. And stay now means stay engaged, stay turned on, stay tuned in, because so many people stay and do not like what they're doing, do not like their boss, so they stay without giving all of their discretionary effort.
That's a really important point, Bev. We don't want people to just stay and fill a slot in our organizations. We want people to stay with their whole hearts in bringing their best to our companies.
Right, exactly.
That's a really good reminder. So Bev, I know this new edition of the book has some important words on the cover about new content that link inclusion and engagement. Could you tell us why you added that in this new edition and what you've learned about inclusion and engagement?
Right. So, first of all, I'm not a diversity, equity, inclusion consultant, but actually, the request came from our publisher, who always seems to know better. And he challenged us, Sharon and I, and he said, I want you to show how every single chapter, that's 26 strategies, 26 practices, connects to inclusion. And we didn't know how to answer it. So we went to our colleagues, our friends, and what we did was interesting. We showed them the 26 chapter titles, and we said, pick 5 of these that you think most support an inclusive environment or most support the idea of belonging, because I know that's an important word too. And we thought we'd get a great new theory and that everyone would pick the same 5. Nobody picked the same 5. And the aha for us was any one of these, depending on the eyes of the other person, is a sign of inclusion. And some maybe popped a little more, but people talked about every single one of those 26 strategies, practices, etc. And I'm glad to share them because I wonder what your audience would think is the most connected to inclusion.
Well, I know that we're going to talk for a few minutes, Bev, about the way that you incorporate the 26 concepts from the book in training that you and your company do with organizations. So maybe this would be a good time to do that. And if folks want to put into the chat your thoughts, the conversation has been quite rich, and we will go to some questions from the chat and from some of you coming on live to talk with Bev shortly. But we want to look at the overview of how you put these 26 concepts into practice when you train people in organizations.
And give me a sign if I have to hurry it up, okay?
Or we've got all the time in the world, Bev.
Well, then let me go. Okay, so here was the dilemma. Sharon and I had 26 chapters in the book that we call strategies. And we knew that we couldn't teach all of them and that we had to figure out a way to bring it to people. And so we clustered them. And we clustered them into 3 groupings. And if we could just show that first slide, wherever it is. Kelly.
Here it comes.
Here it is. That we know that there are 3 clusters. That a talent-focused leader, an engagement-focused leader, and maybe even now an inclusion-focused leader develops people so they grow. Builds relationships, that breeds loyalty, and develops a work culture where people thrive. So we divided our learnings, all those chapters, into those 3 groupings. And here's how we did it. And that's how we managed to train the material. So if you go to the next slide. So development and growth. As we looked at all the chapters, Sharon and I decided, let's organize them according to the alphabet and see what fit what letter. And around development and growth, it was these particular chapters. But I'll tell you what jumped out recently. Maybe because of COVID, maybe because of the big emphasis on inclusion, but I watched opportunities jump. Like people saying, I want to know that when life goes back to whatever normal it goes back to, that I have opportunities. And maybe not just opportunities with what I was doing, but I've learned so much more by being remote. What are the new opportunities? And the other thing I've learned from recent, so much talking about this, is that hire is important. And that hire is important now because we're looking at internal talent mobility. So where is the fit? And if not with what I come in to do, what other opportunities? It hooks right back to opportunities. And I think COVID has taught us the value of connections. And that when you're remote, you miss those connections. And they're great on Zoom, but you miss the interpersonal connection. Like I'm seeing as kids go back to school. I was watching TV and kids were crying with happiness to go to school. and very important.
Some
So
were. My teenagers did not cry with happiness to go back.
did okay. Well, I saw some that did, and I think out of the other big part of my work, that careers, that we know from the data that people leave because they do not see a future in that organization. And they have not had a career conversation, and not a gigantic one, just a conversation about their work, about their career, about maybe what's next. So that was one critical constellation. The second critical one, and this will make sense to everybody, is relationships. And if you go to the next slide, and relationships, it's all about, here's what was interesting when our publisher said, link this to inclusion. We thought, well, we wrote about a dignity chapter, show respect. Isn't that so critical to inclusion? And then he said, no, I want the link in every chapter. So we had to look at the chapters with new glasses and say that when you feel micromanaged, it doesn't give you the freedom you need to do the work the way you'd like to do it, and that's yield. And truth, I want it. I want the truth. I want to know how I could be more effective. And, the one that jumped out was the question, reconsider the rules. The subtitle of that chapter is, which will you keep, the rules or the people? And I remember the time when it was, what you do for one, you do for all. And now it is, people are individuals. There's no what you do for one, you do for all. It's what does each of those alls really need? And when should you really reconsider the rules? So I'm doing this quickly, but you know what I think is a wonderful idea for anybody, because we're going to make the slides available, is to ask your people which one they want more of from you, and let them tell you, I want more feedback, or I need you to listen more, etc. So let's go to the last cluster, and that is culture. How do you build a culture that people really look forward to coming to? And, as I look at these through those glasses and through COVID glasses, what jumped out was information. I'm remote. I haven't been in the office. I haven't seen my colleagues. And I wonder, when are we going back? What's happening? Where are we going to go? What's the future? I want more information. And I think we're learning about the kind of space people need. And I think if leaders ask, how is it going? Tell me about your workspace now that you're remote. Can I do anything to help make it easier? And one of the things that we are going to give anybody who asks is 26 ways to ask your people how they're doing. Ask your remote people how they're doing. So those are the three clusters. And Sharon and I learned that there were 4 letters of the alphabet that we could not fit in. And we called them our success drivers. And that's the next slide. Because they're critical to everything. Critical that you ask. Critical that you learn more. Critical that you do as much of what you can do and tell the truth about what you can't do. Numbers, if you doubt, this is important to every single manager. Just look at how much it costs to lose people. And zenith, meaning it was hard to figure out a Z, but zenith meaning it's not ever done. And we had a client who called zenith meetings when they had a problem no one part of the organization could solve. And we thought, what a great word for our Z. It means keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. So that's kind of how we teach it. That was a very quick walkthrough. But I kind of fall in love with each letter, each time Sharon and I, update the book. So
amazing. Well, so at this point, what we want to do is give some of our attendees the chance to ask some of their questions. And this is a little bit unique. And we don't always bring people over to be panelists to talk directly to our thought leaders. But today you have a unique opportunity to speak face-to-face with Bev. So the hand raise function is at the bottom of your Zoom panel. And if you would like to come on camera or on voice with Bev to voice your own questions, please use that hand raise function and I will bring you over to speak with Bev. In the meantime, there are some questions in the chat that I'll get to. And Bev, Liz is wondering why Xers have to be handled with care. And as an Xer, I'd love to know that too.
It's not just Xers. It's handle with clear. It's the X because I think that's an old. Now it says explore the generations.
Okay.
Forgot to fix that. But there's a big argument over, are the generations really that different? Do we need those generational, descriptors? And it's an ongoing argument. Some say yes, some say no. But when I say explore the generations, it's really ask which of these is important to you. And you'll see some differences and you'll see a lot of similarities.
Perfect. So I have added Trisha and Sarah and Irving and Jane. And let's start with Sarah. No, Sarah was here already. Trisha, let's start with you. If you'd like to unmute or come on camera and share your question with Bev. Let's keep our questions brief so that we can get to as many people as possible.
Hi, Trisha.
Hi. Hi, Bev. Hi, Becky. Thank you so much for opening up the camera for me. I am curious, so many of the conversations you reference need a foundation of trust in the workplace, to be honest. And I would love your comment on that quality and value. Thank you.
In each chapter, when I think about it now, the underlining of each chapter really is trust. Mm-hmm. And it really is. I mean, how can you talk with someone about their goals without having trust? How can you talk with somebody, about what they want more of in their job without that underlying? Without trust, the dynamic is broken. Mm. And, when I think back to reasons why people left, because we actually followed them into that new job in that new organization. And when we dug into those people who said, my manager, it was all about, you can name it different things, but it was a good deal of trust. Yeah. And I love the word. I'm glad you brought it up.
Mm. Great. Yeah, I had a scenario I worked with recently where a person had left after a 45-day placement. And really what she said was, I didn't feel like anyone had my back. So there wasn't that sense of trust. Yeah, so.
Absolutely. And then I want to ask her, say more about have my back. Explain it.
Right.
And then I might be able to understand it.
Right.
Right. Good. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Trisha. So we also have Irving with us. Irving, would you like to come on camera and unmute and ask a question or speak to Bev? I saw your face a minute ago. You'll need to unmute your microphone. So Irving, we'll need you to unmute. There we go.
Enjoying it very, very much. It's delightful hearing you and hearing your expertise and what you have to offer. Keep it up. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Irving. Thank you.
Jane, would you like to join us? Jane, you can unmute and ask Bev a question. I don't see Jane unmuting. Marcia, you're also with us. Would you like to unmute and ask a question?
I sure would. Thank you, Becky. Can you hear me all right?
We can.
Awesome, Bev. Becky, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm enjoying it very much, just like Irving. I manage onboarding for a Fortune 50 company, Bev, and I heard you make a quick reference to onboarding a little bit earlier, but I'm just curious what your research has shown in terms of the onboarding experience, and if there are any potholes or anything that any things that we need to be looking out for and manage not only new hire, but also onboarding new to role first line leaders. So very curious about this from your perspective.
I love that you're asking that. I am lately doing a lot more around onboarding and the kinds of questions that the manager needs to ask about their new employee that they're onboarding. Because now onboarding is going on inside, and it will go on even more as remote employees come back. So I think there's a whole host of new kinds of questions that have to be asked as I onboard people within the organization, as well as from outside the organization in. And, you know, I think I call it re-recruiting. I think the minute you bring in a new employee, you have to start recruiting. You know, immediately recruiting, meaning remembering why they said they joined and asking them if they're getting what they thought they would getting. You know, I remember in one organization, right during onboarding, the company developed an expectations exchange between the manager and the new employee to see if expectations were misaligned or if they really fit. So I see somebody, Lorena's nodding their head, that for me now, onboarding goes on all the time, even once the person is in the organization.
Thank you, Bev. I have Michelle on the line, and while Michelle's coming over, we did have a question in the chat, Bev, about the 26 ways to ask people how they're doing. How are we going to deliver that to folks?
So it's on my website. We have a landing page. It should be there. I'll give it to you too, Becky, so people can get it from you directly.
Got it. Okay, so we'll share a link to that landing page in the chat a little bit later so that people can go there and download the resource. Michelle, do you have a question?
Sorry, my video is saying it didn't. I lost you for a minute, so the video is not playing, but hopefully you can hear me.
We can.
Good. I work for a government agency, and of course, merit pay is not usually included, so you can't get, and we don't have a lot of upward growth because people stay a long time. We actually have a really good length of stay. But how do we encourage those people? What do you have any advice on what to do in those kind of situations?
Right. So we have delivered this particular work a lot to the government, to all kinds of government agencies. But here's what I'm going to give you a little model that I've used. It's in this book under the goals chapter. There always are 6 different ways to move, and I call that career leverage. And if you think about the word lever with 2 R's, there is moving laterally, there is enrichment, which I think in the government, how do you grow right where you are? Yes, what would the vertical move be? And what's the downside of it? The second E is for exploratory. What might you check out to see if it's of any interest? And the first R is for realignment, which means you move back to something that you might have loved more. And if none of those work, where else can you go? Relocation, where else can you go? But I would start with enrich. And I think every single person can grow right where they are.
Excellent, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Michelle. We also have Eric on the line. Eric, if you'd like to unmute and ask a question. Good to see you again.
Hey, good to see you. So my question is, my roles have been usually in the middle management area, and then I've been lucky enough to have some projects over, larger systems, and that's been a great experience. What I find is there seems to be a disconnect where leaders don't necessarily, the people who have the ability to really put into practice what you're suggesting don't always understand or believe in that. So how does somebody in like a role like mine or on the front line put into practice some of the things you're saying? Because it's hard to do that when there are leaders who don't necessarily support that way of thinking, that almost like that, the idea of even using the word love, would be controversial.
Right. You just reminded me of, this happened to me a couple of times where I'll be actually teaching it, and someone will say, if I asked my employees any of those questions, they would say, what book did you just read? What seminar did you just go to? And I say, tell them you read a book. Tell them you went to a seminar, because you want to make sure you can keep them on your team. And sometimes when a manager is shut to any of that, it has a lot to do with their own manager. And it has a lot to do with behaviors they've watched for. And so I think doing this is a top-down intervention, a top-down deal. And what's really hard is if there's nothing in it for me, that attitude, why should I do it? And the thing that's in it is that the more they're seen as engagement focused, the more people will want to work for that particular manager. And maybe if you let that manager know when you see them doing whatever it is that impresses you, let them know. And it's hard. Not every manager is going to be engagement focused, people focused, etc. And we just have to keep trying and giving them easy to implement ideas. Does that make sense? Easy to.
Yes. Yeah. It's almost like you were trying to say, like, encourage when you see them do something.
Oh, yeah. It's like
yeah.
my friend Ken Blanchard. When you see them doing it, say, I love the way you just handled that. Here's what I saw that you did. Right. Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. So I'm going to ask a question from the chat, and also just let everyone know if you'd like to come over and talk to Bev face-to-face, please feel free to use the hand raise function. Unfortunately, we won't be able to get to all the questions, but we're going to try to get to as many as we can. So Dan did ask Bev, what are the most commonly overlooked signs that someone is planning on leaving? So how can we as managers or leaders know and anticipate if someone's thinking of leaving, and what can we do about it?
And I would say the signals are there. Are you looking? Because someone who usually, of course, bounces in with energy, or now on Zoom, you can look at their face and see, are they turned on or turned off? And it's again, I hate to say it, it's notice, and say something. And it is, ask me that question again. Wait a minute.
Sure. What are some signs that you might,
signs.
that someone might be leaving? What would we be noticing? What would we be looking out for?
I think you'd be looking for a change in what they turn over to you, a change in the way they hand in that report, a change in the way they handle the client, a change in their own, I'll do that, their own hand raise. You know, in our book on stay interviews, we have a whole list of signs that we often ignore. And whoever asked the question, I will send you that list of, it really is danger signs or warning signs. And it's very person dependent. And the secret is ask.
And Susie has an interesting comment here. She said, will knowing that make a difference? And so if you can notice that someone may be in danger of leaving, then you want to do something about it, right? And this book has 26 possible ways you can do something about it.
And the way to do it is to show them the 26, you're going to get the handout, the clusters, and say which word, because it's just a word, which one do you wish I would do more of? And I think that's critical.
Thank you, Bev. So we have Mitch. Mitch, welcome.
Bev, good to see you. Congratulations on the launch or relaunch of your book. Super excited. So the question I had for you, sort of been puzzling me, is this idea as COVID ends, more people are sort of more comfortable and established in work. There's been, I think, a pent-up desire to move and, you know, change jobs and shift around. And so as you sort of think macro level, as you know, love them and lose them and employee turnover and stuff like that, do you see potentially a mass exodus or transition or movement, a pent-up demand for a movement going on in the industry that we should be worried about in, you know, 6 months from now?
I think anytime there's an earthquake, pardon me, I'm in LA, earthquake, like COVID, that people rethink.
Yeah.
You know, am I where I want to be? Am I doing what I want to do? And I think this will cause a lot of people to rethink. And it's why I think managers need to reach out for those conversations. And maybe the most direct question is, what are you rethinking now about your work, about your workspace? And listen hard for the answer. And I know Mitch Zenger has a great, does some great work too in this whole field. Check him out on LinkedIn.
Congrats on your book.
Thanks.
Thank you for the question, Mitch. And Bev, I love that powerful invitation that you've issued to anyone who's working with employees to really ask, you know, what has shifted for you due to COVID? What are you looking for now in your career that you weren't thinking of a year ago? I love those questions. So thanks, Mitch.
And maybe it's back to the A for ask, you know, that giant, you know, and ask the second question. Like the first might be, how have things changed? And they'll tell you. Don't move on to another whole question. Stick with that question and drill down. I mean, it's just the best thing.
Fantastic. So many questions in the chat, and I have one question from Jan. She's wondering, she says school superintendents and their administrators need this valuable information. And have you worked with school systems at all, Bev?
You know, no, I haven't. Not with school systems. And if anybody out there wants to bring this into school systems, let me know. And I'll gladly help you do that. But you're right. It's in every organization. You know, healthcare, huge. The IT world, huge. In everywhere.
Very cool. I'm going to ask one final question, and then we have a very special, exciting announcement. The sponsor for today's event, Barrett Kohler Publishers, actually has a giveaway for people who have attended today's event live. Bev, do you by chance have those cards with you? So along with the new edition of Love 'em or Lose 'em, the 6th edition, there's also a deck of cards that makes it easy for people who don't love to read to implement these ideas regularly in their organizations. And we have 10 sets of cards that we're going to give away to folks who participated in today's event. All you need to do is send an email to bev@bevkaye.com, express your interest in those cards, and we're going to select 10 people randomly to receive them. I think Bev's trying to get her hands on the cards. So Kelly, if you can put that email in the chat, we would love to give away, Barrett Kohler Publishers, the sponsor of today's event, would love to give away those cards to folks. So Bev is showing you the cards. So you can email Bev to be entered to win a set of those Love 'em or Lose 'em 6th edition cards. There is an E on the end of Bev's last name. So it's bev@bevkaye.com. Just the way her last name is spelled with the E. Thanks again for joining us on camera, Mitch. Great to meet you. And as we wrap up today's event, we do have a number of calls to action for you that Kelly's going to put up on the slide. We're going to do our best to provide all the resources that Bev mentioned on today's call in a follow-up email that will go out to you in the next day or so. But we hope that you'll choose to buy a copy of the 6th edition of Love 'em or Lose 'em. It's now available on Amazon. Or if you've already read this edition, we would love for you to post an Amazon review, which gives important social proof to Bev as an author. And you can learn more about the work that Bev is doing in the world and how to hire her to do that work as a speaker or a consultant. And you can find out all about that at bevkaye.com. You can also download your free excerpt of the book at bevkaye.com. And you can email Bev in order to be entered to win a Love 'em card deck. We're so thrilled that you've invested your time with us today. We hope you'll take the time to get to know more about Bev and her work. I still can't believe that 71% of you never heard of Bev or were exposed to her work before today, but what a lucky blessing that we had to be able to share with new folks about your work. And Bev, I wonder if you could give us some parting wisdom or inspiration about how to love our people well so that they stay as we wrap up this time together.
You know, first, I just want to say I love you, Becky. I've known you since you founded your organization, and you are doing a great job, and you treat your people beautifully. You treat your people with love. So, you know, maybe the only thing I can say to everybody is ask your, you know, I have something on the internet. Ask your husband, ask your kids, ask your friends questions that tell you more about them. As simple as, you know, what do you love doing? Of all the things you do, what brings you the most joy? And then dig a little bit on their answer.
I love that. And so I have some exciting news I forgot to mention with the calls to action. We have one more webinar event that I'll be a part of with Bev on this journey this spring, and it's with an emerging new author named Mike Horn, and he's on the call. I saw him post in the chat, which is what reminded me. So we have an upcoming webinar event with Mike Horn and Bev Kaye on April 13th, and Bev will put that link in the chat if people want to sign up for that event as well, and that will be in the follow-up email. So Bev, thank you so much for sharing your heart with us today, and we look forward to more opportunities to learn with all of you.
Thank you. Thank you.